They already know. That is the thing nobody around them realizes. They already know about the tension in the marriage that everyone else thinks is fine. They already know which colleague is quietly building a case against their boss. They already know that the friend group is fracturing, that the cheerful coworker is close to breaking, that the relationship two people just announced with so much excitement is standing on ground that will not hold. They knew before anyone said a word. They knew from a glance, a pause, a shift in energy so small that no instrument could have measured it. And they sat with that knowledge, completely alone, and said absolutely nothing. This is one of the most misunderstood things about people who perceive deeply. The popular image is of someone who sees through everything and says so. The person who calls out the lie, confronts the manipulation, names the dynamic no one else is willing to name. But that is not what most deeply perceptive people actually do. Most of them go silent. Most of them have learned through experience that was painful enough to teach the lesson permanently, that what they see is not something the world is ready to hear. So they keep it. They carry it. And from the outside, they look like everyone else. Calm, agreeable, present. And from the inside, they are holding more truths about the people around them than any of those people would be comfortable knowing. Today, we are going to examine why this happens, what it costs, and what it reveals about the painful gap between what deeply perceptive people experience and what the people around them never get to understand about them. Welcome back. Let's get into it. The silence starts as a lesson, and like most lessons that stick, it was learned the hard way. There is a particular sequence of events that almost every deeply perceptive person can trace in their own history. At some point, usually early, usually in a context where they trusted the other person completely, they said what they saw. They named the thing they had noticed. They shared the observation that seemed to them so obvious it barely needed stating. Maybe they told a friend that the person she was falling for was performing, not feeling. Maybe they said out loud in a family conversation that something was wrong between two people everyone was pretending were fine. Maybe they named the dynamic in a group that everyone was silently aware of, but had agreed, without ever discussing it, to leave unnamed. And what happened was not what they expected. They were not thanked for their clarity. They were not met with relief that someone had finally said it. Instead, they were looked at with discomfort, suspicion, or outright hostility. They were told they were reading too much into things. They were accused of being negative, of creating problems where none existed, of projecting, of being unable to just let things be. And the person or the group closed ranks, not against the thing the perceptive person had named, but against the perceptive person themselves for having named it. In psychology, this response has a specific mechanism behind it. When a truth that a person or group has been collectively managing, keeping at a careful distance through humor, avoidance, or deliberate distraction, gets suddenly and directly named, it produces what researchers call psychological reactance. The brain experiences the unwanted truth as a threat to its carefully maintained equilibrium. And the fastest way to neutralize that threat is not to engage with the truth, but to discredit the person who introduced it. So the perceptive person becomes the problem, not what they saw, them, for seeing it. This happens enough times, and the lesson calcifies. You can see everything you want. You cannot say everything you see. And so begins a life of strategic silence that most people in their world will never fully understand. But here is what the silence actually costs. And this is the part that rarely gets examined. The assumption from the outside is that staying quiet is neutral. That if you have noticed something uncomfortable and chosen not to say it, the situation is simply unchanged. You have neither helped nor harmed. You have simply stayed out of it. But for the person carrying the knowledge, silence is not neutral at all. It is active. It requires continuous effort. It means sitting across from someone and maintaining a conversation about ordinary things while simultaneously holding a complete and detailed understanding of what that person is not saying, not facing, not yet ready to look at. It means attending the celebration while privately carrying the knowledge that the thing being celebrated is fragile. It means watching someone walk towards something painful and keeping your hands in your pockets because you have learned at considerable personal cost, that reaching out will only make you the problem. This is what creates the specific emotional texture that deeply perceptive people carry and almost never name. It is not quite sadness. It is not quite lonely. It is the particular weight of a person who is always slightly outside the shared reality everyone else is inhabiting, close enough to participate, too aware to fully belong. If any part of what you are hearing right now is resonating with something you have carried for a long time, subscribe to this channel right now. This is the work we do here, examining the psychological experience that most people are living without ever having the language for it. Hit the subscribe button and stay with us, because what comes next is the thing that most deeply perceptive people most need to understand about the silence they have chosen. The silence has a shadow that turns inward. And this is where the real damage accumulates. Because the perceptive person who has learned not to share what they see does not stop processing what they see. The information keeps arriving. The observations keep accumulating. The pattern recognition keeps running. What changes is only the outlet. And when there is no outlet, no person, no space, no relationship, where the full truth of what you are perceiving can be safely set down, the knowledge begins to compress inside the person carrying it. It becomes a kind of internal pressure, a chronic low-level tension between the reality they are experiencing and the reality they are performing for everyone around them. Over time, this gap between inner experience and outer expression produces something that looks, from the outside, like withdrawal, like the cold, like the perceptive person becoming harder to reach, less willing to engage, more guarded than they used to be. And the people around them, seeing this, often interpret it as a mood, a phase, a personality shift. What they are actually witnessing is the person managing the weight of a private world that has grown too large to carry invisibly and too dangerous, in their experience, to share. The deepest cost of this silence is what it does to intimacy, because genuine closeness between two people requires a degree of honest visibility. It requires the ability to be seen not just in your pleasant, agreeable, easy-to-receive moments, but in your full complexity, including the parts that are uncomfortable, the things you have noticed that other people would rather you hadn't, the way your mind actually works when it is not performing accessibility. And the perceptive person who has been trained by experience to keep their deepest observations private has lost, in a very specific way, the ability to be that visible. They know how to make others feel seen. They have never quite learned how to see themselves. So what is the way back? The first movement is the recognition that not all silences are the same. There is the silence of wisdom, the perception held quietly, because sharing it would harm more than help, because the timing is wrong, because the other person is not ready. This silence is a form of care. And then there is the silence of protection. The perception held because sharing it has historically led to punishment, isolation, being made into a problem. This silence is a wound wearing the mask of discretion. The work is learning to tell one from the other. And then, slowly, carefully, in relationships that have genuinely earned the trust, beginning to let the second kind of silence go. The second movement is finding the one or two relationships where the full truth can exist. Not every person in a perceptive person's life needs access to everything they see. But somewhere, in at least one relationship, the cost of silence needs to be set down. This is not about finally saying all the things to all the people. It is about locating one space where the private world and the visible world are allowed to be the same world, where what you see does not have to be managed, curated, or kept. Where the exhausting gap between inner experience and outer performance can close, even briefly, even partially. And the third movement is the most difficult and the most necessary. It is the deliberate practice of allowing yourself to be wrong. The deeply perceptive person has learned not to speak, because when they spoke, they were told they were wrong, they were projecting, they were imagining things. And many of them, carrying that history, have swung to the opposite extreme, becoming so certain in their private perceptions that there is no longer any room for genuine uncertainty. But certainty, however earned, is also a wall. The person who is always right about what they see inside other people is also, always, alone inside their own knowing. Real connection requires the willingness to be surprised, to be wrong, to discover that what you saw was only part of the picture, to let someone show you the part you missed. Because here is what is true about every person who sees what others don't and keeps it quietly to themselves. They are not cold. They are not withholding. They are not superior or detached or above the ordinary mess of human connection. They are tired. They are carrying something heavy in a world that has consistently told them that what they carry is too much. And what they need most is not an audience for everything they know. It is a single, genuine place where knowing everything they know does not make them a problem. They have spent enough of their life being the person who sees. It is time for someone to see them back. Have you been living inside this silence, and has there ever been one person in your life who made it feel safe enough to finally set it down? Share that in the comments. I read every one. Hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.